Welcome, students. Let's continue our chapter Matter in Our Surroundings. Today, we are going to discuss diffusion. What is diffusion? So, students, diffusion is the movement of particles, liquid or gas, in fact, solids, from an area of high concentration to an area of lower concentration. Or we can say that the spreading out and mixing of a substance with another substance due to the motion of its particles, that is diffusion. So basically intermixing of the particles of matter is known as diffusion. The diffusion of one substance into another substance goes on until a uniform mixture is formed. Let's take an example of diffusion. If we take a gas jar full of bromine vapors and invert another gas jar containing air over it, then after some time you will see that the red brown vapors of bromine spread out into the upper gas jar that's containing air. In this way, the upper gas jar, which contains colorless air in it, also turns red brown. So this mixing is due to the diffusion of bromine vapors or bromine gas into air. So air from the upper gas jar also diffuses into the lower gas jar, but although we cannot see it because air is colorless. So basically diffusion is a property of matter which is based on the motion of its particles. Diffusion is fastest in gases and slowest in solids. The diffusion is fastest in gases, right? But why? Because the particles in gases move very rapidly, and diffusion is slowest in solids because there the particles do not move much, and the diffusion in liquids is much faster than that in solids. But yes, that's less than gases. And one more important thing is here that the rate of diffusion increases on increasing the temperature of the diffusing substance. It means by heating, when you increase the temperature of the substance, the rate of diffusion will increase. Now, why by increasing the temperature you will observe that the rate of diffusion increases? It's because, students, when the temperature of a substance is increased by heating, its particles gain kinetic energy and they will start moving more rapidly, and this increase in the speed of the particles of a substance increases the rate of diffusion. Okay, so basically the phenomena of diffusion tells us that the particles of matter are constantly moving. Okay, so now let's discuss the diffusion in gases. So students, I told you that the diffusion in gases is very fast. Why? Because again the particles in gases, they move very quickly in all directions. So the because of that, rate of diffusion increases in gases. It's very fast in gases. And the rate of diffusion of a gas, however, depends on the density of a gas. You see, light gases diffuse faster than the heavy gases. Okay, and as I showed you, demonstrated an experiment to you of where we are having a gas jar of bromine vapors and a gas jar of air, you will see that the gases easily diffuse, quickly diffuse into each other. Okay, in fact, you guys are having a lot of examples where we see the observe the diffusion in gases from our everyday life, like the smell of food that is being cooked in the kitchen reaches us even from a considerable distance, right? Why? And if we have to take the smell of a cold food, then we have to go close to that. Why? So basically, when the food is cooked, some of the substances in food, they release gases that are having the smell of food in them. And the particle of these gases, they move very quickly and mix up with the air by diffusion. And when that air containing gases reach our nose, we get the smell of food that's being cooked in the kitchen, even without entering into the kitchen. So the smell of food being cooked reaches us even from a considerable distance by the process of diffusion. And most particularly if fish is being fried in a home. So you know that the its peculiar sharp smell can be detected even when we are quite far off. Why? Due to the diffusion of gases that are produced during the frying of fish into air. In fact, whenever it's hot food, it's about hot food. Smell of hot food reaches us even when we are at a considerable distance. But when we have to get the smell of a cold food, we have to go close to it because the rate of diffusion of hot gases is much faster than the rate of diffusion of cold gases that are released by the cold food. In fact, another example you can have, that's when we light an incense stick in a corner of a room, its fragrance separates in the whole room very quickly. The fragrance of this incense stick spreads all around due to the diffusion of its smoke into the air. And particles of gases which are produced by this burning incense stick, they move rapidly in all directions. They collide with the particles of air present in the room, they mix with air and reach every part of the room very quickly. In fact, when someone opens a bottle of perfume, you know that its smell separates in the whole room within no time. So why the smell of perfume separates in no time? Because of the diffusion of perfume vapors into air. See, when the bottle of perfume is opened, what happens? The liquid perfume changes into vapors, and the perfume vapors, they move very rapidly in all directions in air, mix with air particles, and hence separate with air in the whole room. In fact, you guys know that the leak when if sometimes cooking gas leaks, smell can be easily detected. Why? Because of the diffusion of a strong smelling substance. There, ethyl mercaptan is present in it, and when that diffuses into the air, we'll easily detect the smell of the LPG if there's a leakage in LPG gas. Now let's talk about the diffusion in liquids. See, diffusion in liquids is slower than that in gases. Why? Because the particles in liquids move slowly as compared to the particles in gases. We are having examples of diffusion in liquids, like as we had discussed in previous slides, like if a crystal of potassium permanganate is placed at the bottom of water in a beaker, then the purple color of potassium permanganate spreads into the whole water slowly. So the spreading of purple color of potassium permanganate into water on its own is due to the diffusion of potassium permanganate particles into water, right? In fact, if we drop ink into a beaker of water, then you know that the color of ink spreads into the whole water of beaker. And why? So the spreading of ink in water on its own is it's again due to the diffusion of ink particles into the water. One more important thing is here, like you know, the gases, carbon dioxide, oxygen, these are essential for the survival of aquatic plants and animals, right? So, the carbon dioxide gas, oxygen gas, these are present in air, in atmosphere, and they diffuse into water. They diffuse into lakes, rivers, sea, and dissolve in it. Then the aquatic plants use the dissolved carbon dioxide for preparing food by photosynthesis. You are aware about it. And aquatic animals use that dissolved oxygen of water for breathing. So here it's also an example of diffusion of gas into a liquid. In fact, solids, liquids, as well as gases, they can diffuse into liquids. And again, the rate of diffusion in liquids is much faster than that in solids, because the particles in liquid move much more freely and have greater spaces between them as compared to the particles in solids, right? Now let's talk about diffusion in solids. See, diffusion can also take place in solids, and but it is a very slow process. See, suppose if we write something on a blackboard and leave it unclean for a considerable period of time, say at least for 15 days or 20 days, or suppose for a year, then we want to erase uh, um, that is written on the board. You will observe that it becomes quite difficult to clean the blackboard afterwards. Why? Because that some of the particles of chalk have diffused into the surface of blackboard, so it becomes difficult to uh, erase that, to clean that blackboard. In fact, if two metal blocks are bound together tightly and kept undisturbed for few years, then you will see that the particles of one metal are found to have diffused into the other metal. So it becomes difficult to separate them. So the diffusion of solid substance into another solid substance is so slow that many people think that diffusion does not take place in solids at all. But yes, the diffusion takes place in solids as well, but it is very very slow, because the particles in solids, they do not move from their fixed positions. They just vibrate about their fixed positions, right? So due to lack of the appreciable movements in the particles of solids, diffusion of solids is rare, very rare. Okay, so this was all about the diffusion, and remember this point, that diffusion in gases is very very fast.